The moment you stop reacting to a narcissist is the moment their power begins to die. They never feared your anger, they feared your awakening. Because once you realize your value, their manipulation collapses, their control disappears, and the very person they tried to break becomes unstoppable. There comes a moment in life when you finally understand that not every battle deserves your voice, not every attack deserves your reaction, and not every person deserves access to your energy. The day your silence became their greatest punishment was the day you discovered the power that had been hidden inside you all along. For so long, they believed your emotions were their source of control. Every explanation you gave fed their confidence. Every defense you made strengthened their illusion of superiority. They expected you to chase closure, to beg for understanding, to continue proving your worth to people who had already decided to misunderstand you. But the moment you became silent, everything changed. Your silence was not weakness. It was discipline. It was emotional mastery. It was the decision to protect your peace instead of feeding their chaos. While they waited for another reaction, another argument, another emotional response, they were met with something far more powerful, your absence. And that absence forced them into a battle they could not escape. Because silence creates reflection. When manipulation no longer works, the narcissistic mind begins to collapse under the weight of its own emptiness. They can no longer distract themselves with your pain. They can no longer feel powerful through your attention. For the first time, they are left alone with the consequences of who they truly are. Meanwhile, your silence begins transforming you. You stop waking up with anxiety over their opinions. You stop carrying the burden of proving your value. You stop shrinking yourself to keep toxic people comfortable. In that silence, you rediscover ambition. You rediscover clarity. You rediscover the version of yourself that existed before fear entered your life. That is why your silence unsettles them so deeply. They expected you to break without them, but instead you became stronger. They expected you to return, but instead you evolved. They expected guilt to control you, but instead you chose self-respect. Nothing confuses a manipulator more than a person who no longer needs validation. And here is the greatest truth of all. Success becomes inevitable the moment your energy is no longer wasted on emotional battles that were designed to drain you. Your focus sharpens. Your confidence rises. Your future expands. The same mind that once overthought every insult now begins creating goals, discipline, and vision. Your silence became a message louder than words could ever deliver. It declared that your peace mattered more than their approval. It declared that your future mattered more than their gains. It declared that your value was never dependent on someone else's ability to recognize it. The day you stopped reacting was the day you started winning. And while they searched for ways to regain control, you were building a life so powerful, so disciplined, and so fulfilled that your growth itself became the consequence they never expected to face. There is a powerful transformation that occurs the moment you stop allowing someone else to control your emotions, your decisions, and your sense of worth. A narcissist survives on influence. Their confidence is built upon the ability to shape how others think, feel, and react. As long as they can control your peace, they believe they control your life. But the day you reclaim your mind is the day their hidden collapse begins. At first, they will pretend they are unaffected. Pride forces them to wear a mask of confidence. They may act distant, superior, or indifferent. But beneath that performance is a growing panic they never expected to face. Because your freedom exposes the truth they worked so hard to hide. Control was never strength. It was dependence. The narcissist depends on your attention to feel significant. They depend on your reactions to feel powerful. They depend on your emotional attachment to escape their own inner emptiness. When you finally stop seeking their approval, they lose the mirror they used to validate themselves. And that loss creates a silent storm within them. They begin questioning why their words no longer affect you. They become frustrated by your calmness. They feel threatened by your growth because your confidence reminds them of everything they failed to destroy inside you. The more peaceful you become, the more restless they become. That is the hidden irony of life. The person who once tried to weaken you unintentionally trains you to become mentally stronger. Every disappointment teaches discernment. Every betrayal teaches self-respect. Every painful lesson forces you to discover abilities, discipline, and resilience that comfort could never produce. Meanwhile, the narcissist begins losing control over the one thing they valued most: influence. Without influence, manipulation has no power. Without your emotional reactions, their strategies become empty. Without your attention, their false image begins to crack. And while they secretly struggle with frustration, confusion, and emotional instability, you begin entering the greatest season of your life. Because energy once wasted on toxic battles now becomes fuel for your future. You start focusing on your purpose instead of their opinions. You invest in your goals instead of their drama. Your mind becomes clearer. Your confidence becomes stronger. Your standards become higher. You no longer chase acceptance because you finally recognize your value was never created by another person's approval. This is why your success becomes so painful for them to witness. Not because of money, status, or achievements alone, but because your healing proves they failed to control your destiny. Your peace becomes evidence of their defeat. Your discipline becomes evidence of your awakening. Your happiness becomes evidence that their presence was never the source of your strength. And the deeper truth is this: people who seek to dominate others are often fighting hidden battles within themselves. They fear abandonment. They fear insignificance. They fear the emptiness they carry in silence. That is why they crave control so desperately. But the moment you emotionally detach, their greatest fear becomes reality. They lose access to the very person who once gave them power. And while they secretly collapse trying to regain control, you rise into a version of yourself that is wiser, stronger, calmer, and finally free from the chains that once held your potential hostage. There are people who enter your life only to take, to control, and to feed their own insecurities through your kindness, loyalty, and emotional strength. They recognize light within you long before you fully recognize it within yourself. That is why powerful souls often become targets for narcissistic individuals. Strength attracts admiration, but it also attracts those who wish to possess what they secretly lack. A powerful soul carries something rare: vision, resilience, compassion, ambition, and emotional depth. These qualities inspire others, but to a narcissist, they become a source of dependency. They are drawn to your energy because your confidence gives them temporary significance. Your love becomes their emotional shelter. Your attention becomes the foundation of their fragile identity. But the moment they lose access to you, something begins to happen beneath the surface that few people ever see. The emotional collapse begins in silence. At first, they convince themselves they are still in control. Pride forces them to pretend they have moved on easily. They may seek distractions, attention, or new sources of validation to hide the emptiness growing inside them. But external distractions cannot replace the loss of someone whose spirit carried genuine strength. Because powerful souls leave permanent impressions, you brought stability into chaos. You brought sincerity into manipulation. You brought vision into confusion. Even when they fail to appreciate your value, your presence filled emotional voids they could never fill alone. And once you are gone, the contrast becomes impossible for them to ignore. This is where the hidden collapse truly begins. They start comparing every future connection to the peace, loyalty, and energy they lost with you. They realize that authentic people are rare. The control they once mistook for power now feels hollow because manipulation can never create genuine fulfillment. And while they secretly wrestle with frustration and regret, your own transformation begins to accelerate. Pain has a strange ability to awaken greatness within human beings. The disappointment that once broke your heart begins building your discipline. The rejection that once weakened your confidence begins strengthening your self-worth. You stop searching for validation from those incapable of giving genuine love, and you begin creating a life centered around purpose, growth, and inner peace. That is the greatest shift of all. You no longer need revenge because success becomes your answer. Your healing becomes your answer. Your emotional freedom becomes your answer. Meanwhile, the narcissist faces the one battle they spent their entire life trying to escape, confronting themselves in silence. Without your energy to consume, they are left alone with insecurity. Without your attention to rely on, they are forced to face emotional emptiness. Without your forgiveness to rescue them repeatedly, they begin realizing the magnitude of what they lost, and the truth becomes impossible for them to hide from forever. People can replace attention, but they cannot easily replace a powerful soul. A powerful soul changes lives through presence alone. They inspire growth, they create emotional safety, they awaken ambition in others. Their value cannot be measured by temporary emotions because their influence remains long after they are gone. That is why your departure becomes their hidden collapse. Not because you sought revenge, not because you fought louder, but because your absence forced them to experience life without the strength, peace, and light they once took for granted, while you continued rising toward the destiny that was waiting for you long before they ever entered your life. There is nothing more threatening to a narcissist than witnessing the growth of someone they once believed they could control. The moment you begin evolving beyond the fear, confusion, and emotional exhaustion they tried to trap you in, you become a living reminder of the insecurities they have spent their entire lives trying to hide. Your growth becomes a mirror they cannot escape. At one time, they believed your dependence gave them power. They felt secure when you questioned yourself, when you sought their approval, when your energy revolved around keeping peace in a relationship built on imbalance. As long as you remained uncertain of your worth, they could maintain the illusion of superiority. But growth changes everything. The moment you begin rebuilding your confidence, setting boundaries, and focusing on your purpose, their emotional foundation begins to shake. Because your transformation exposes a truth they never wanted to face, you were never weak, only temporarily distracted from your own greatness. And that realization becomes unbearable for them. A narcissist often survives through comparison and control. They measure their value by the influence they hold over others. But when you stop reacting emotionally, when you stop chasing validation, and when you begin succeeding without their permission, they are forced to confront the emptiness within themselves. Your confidence reminds them of their insecurity. Your peace reminds them of their chaos. Your discipline reminds them of their lack of self-control. Your healing reminds them that they failed to break your spirit. This is why your growth often triggers strange reactions from people who once had influence over your emotions. They may criticize your progress, mock your ambitions, or attempt to return into your life just as you begin moving forward. Not because they suddenly value you more, but because your evolution threatens the identity they created around controlling you. But you must understand something powerful. Every obstacle you survived was preparing you for this transformation. The pain taught discernment. The betrayal taught self-respect. The loneliness taught independence. And the struggle awakened the strength that comfort could never produce. Many people never rise beyond the opinions of others. They spend their entire lives trapped inside fear, waiting for permission to pursue greatness. But the moment you stopped allowing toxic voices to define your value, your real life began. That is why your growth carries such extraordinary power. It is not only personal success, it is psychological freedom. You no longer shrink yourself to protect fragile egos. You no longer explain your worth to those committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer sacrifice your peace to maintain relationships built on manipulation. And while you continue building a stronger mind, a stronger future, and a stronger sense of purpose, the narcissist faces an internal battle they cannot easily silence, because deep down they recognize something they never expected. The person they underestimated became unstoppable. Your success forces them to confront every insecurity they buried beneath arrogance. Your resilience forces them to confront the weakness they disguised as control. Your happiness forces them to confront the fact that they could not destroy what was destined to rise. And in the end, your greatest victory is not making them regret losing you. Your greatest victory is becoming so aligned with your purpose, your confidence, and your inner peace that their opinion no longer has the power to influence the direction of your life. There comes a defining moment in life when you finally awaken to the truth that your mind, your peace, and your future were never meant to be controlled by another person. For a long time, the narcissist believed they could influence your emotions at will. They believed your kindness was weakness, your patience was dependence, and your forgiveness guaranteed endless access to your energy. But the day you stopped responding to manipulation was the day their silent destruction began. A narcissist gains power through emotional control. Every reaction you gave strengthened their confidence. Every moment you defended yourself fed their sense of importance. They relied on confusion, guilt, and emotional exhaustion to keep you trapped inside a cycle where your focus remained on them instead of your own destiny. But something extraordinary happens when a person finally rediscovers self-worth. They stop seeking approval from those incapable of giving genuine respect. And once that shift occurs, manipulation loses its power completely. At first, the narcissist cannot understand what changed. They may repeat old behaviors, expecting familiar reactions. They may attempt guilt, criticism, charm, or emotional games to regain influence over your mind. But when they are met with calmness instead of chaos, silence instead of arguments, and confidence instead of fear, they begin experiencing something deeply unsettling, loss of control. That loss strikes at the center of their emotional identity because manipulation was never simply behavior, it was survival. Controlling others allowed them to escape confronting their own insecurities. Dominating your emotions distracted them from the emptiness they carried within themselves. But your growth removes that escape. Your boundaries become a mirror reflecting everything they tried to avoid. Your independence forces them to witness the strength they underestimated in you. Your peace becomes evidence that their presence was never the source of your happiness. And this realization creates a silent destruction they rarely reveal outwardly. Because nothing weakens a manipulator more than realizing they can no longer influence the person they once controlled.